966.
Richard, my one big thing, President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia is locked in and has been confirmed by both the White House and Saudi Arabia. First, let's get to the facts on the visit here. The official visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will take place from July 15th through 16th. President Biden will be visiting Jeddah after first stopping in Israel. President Biden will attend a meeting of 9 GCC leaders there. And Jeddah is the current chair of the GCC, so that end of it makes sense. Now on to some interesting between the lines stuff on this. Firstly, comparing the two announcements or statements from the US and Saudi side. The White House statement noted that the visit is, quote, at the invitation of King Salman, and that President Biden, quote, appreciates King Salman's leadership and his invitation. He looks forward to this important visit with Saudi Arabia, which has been a strategic partner of the United States for nearly 8 decades. It does not directly mention Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The Saudi press agency, however, does confirm that President Biden would meet directly with Crown Prince MBS, and that's been repeated by major media outlets as well, so it's going to happen. The SPA also highlights all the issues that President Biden and MBS will discuss. Quote, the Crown Prince and President Biden will hold official talks that will focus on various areas of bilateral cooperation and joint efforts to address regional and global challenges, and this begins a list, exploring cooperation on emerging tech, economic investment, space, renewable energy, cybersecurity, climate and environmental initiatives, food and energy security, and food and energy security is mentioned pretty low on this list, and expanding trade and commercial ties to enable both countries to confront mutual challenges and seize the opportunities of the 21st century. Richard, this is a very important visit by President Biden to Saudi Arabia. Let's talk a little bit about it.
I like how you did that. That was a nice wrap up, and I think that's a good take to sort of examine the different announcements, the tone and the tenor and the focus and details of the different announcements. Because, and I also think it's important to understand that, he's just not going to Saudi. He's doing, it's a bigger trip, but obviously the overwhelming media focus for this trip is on the handshake between President Joe Biden and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But as you point out, Lucien, and President Biden is traveling first to Israel, then the West Bank, as the Biden administration is re-engaged with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas after he and the Palestinian National Authority had been mostly ignored by the Trump administration. He's scheduled to fly directly to Jeddah, which is something, and meet with all 6 of the GCC heads of state, plus representatives from Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and probably Morocco. So this is, essentially all of our friendly Arab allies in one place in Jeddah, meeting with the President of the United States. This is a critical gathering, and it's an important opportunity for President Biden to reset and perhaps chart a new course for the U.S. relationship with the Gulf and our allies in the broader Middle East. And that is something, Lucien, that obviously we've talked about frequently on the 966, the need for a reset, recalibration, and update of the relationships. I suspect those meetings will include an airing of grievances on the part of our Gulf and Arab allies. And I think this is not only healthy, but essential to moving forward. It's kind of like therapy. These grievances have built up, and they're real and genuine from their point of view, and it's important to share it. The long shot possibility in the outside lane of results, and one that many pro-Israeli constituencies are advocating, is some move toward normalization with Israel. Perhaps even a proposed region-wide integrated air and missile defense umbrella that includes both Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I think we'll talk about that a little later, I think also in one of our 6 yellow topics. My guess is that the win on that front, quote unquote normalization, will be an announcement of a U.S. brokered agreement between Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel on the Tiran and Sunavira Islands. Reportedly, this would result in expanded overflight routes over Saudi Arabia for flights originating in Israel. We've done a segment on this, talked about it. It's fascinating. It's underway, and hopefully it'll be successfully concluded. And if it is a win. As we talked about, better to be cooperating, better to be talking. It's a nice pretext for these people, these countries, to be in the room together and have a civil conversation and resolve the dispute. So that would be a win. But let's talk about that handshake. As we know, it is a fraught subject in the U.S. Because of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, combined with Joe Biden's campaign trail pledge to make Saudi Arabia a, quote, pariah, unquote. As I have noted previously, my frame of reference on this is not the heinous and heartbreaking act itself or the parsing of what Mohammed bin Salman did or did not know. It's really my disagreement with what seems to be a Saudi exceptionalism when it comes to highly objectionable extrajudicial cross-border actions, which this obviously was. You know, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was an illegal extrajudicial act. But when I say, Saudi exceptionalism, what I mean is, if this is a litmus test for not dealing with someone in Mohammed bin Salman's position, consistency demands that we reject any interaction or engagement with Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Recep Erdogan, and Kim Jong-un, to name just four. And each of these, by the way, have met with the U.S. president within the last 4 years. And if we're going to be really thorough with the list, you can go much farther. And it would have to include Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. In the last 2 months alone, Israel has carried out a double-digit number of strikes throughout the Middle East. Not only on Israel's northern front, but according to foreign reports, also against targets in Iran and Iraq. 4 Iranians tied to the country's nuclear program or Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have also died under mysterious circumstances, all in incidents blamed on Israel. And this is not a secret policy. Last week, Prime Minister Bennett specifically stated that, quote, the past year saw a turning point in Israel's strategy vis-a-vis Iran. In the past year, the state of Israel has taken action against the head of the terrorist octopus and not just against the arms as was done in previous decades. Now, unquote. This is not to, attack Israel. Even though these actions, are extrajudicial cross-border illegal attacks. And, there's many ways to justify it. There's many ways we've justified in the global war on terror, the preemptive attacks. But we are not going to shun Israel, and nor should we. But we have seen tons of ink spilled on this Biden visit to the region already, and it's a month away, so a torrent more is still to come. So my point is consistency and U.S. national interest. And in my view, in terms of a lot of this, the tons of ink and the articles that we see every day, Lucien, I thought Richard Haas, president of the Council on Foreign Relations, offered an excellent insight in an essay he wrote for The Strategist just this week, in which he states, quote, a successful foreign policy for a global power such as the U.S. cannot choose values over interests. A pure value-centered approach to Saudi Arabia or towards China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea for that matter is unsustainable. The principal measure of foreign policy is that it prioritizes the country's security over its preferences. Realism must prevail over idealism. History suggests that the ability of a country, even one as powerful as the U.S., to bring about political reform in other countries is limited, unquote. So I applaud President Biden's return to realism, and I sincerely hope his trip brings positive returns for the interests and the security of the United States.
Well said. The headline here is that President Biden is visiting Saudi Arabia and that it's taking place between June 15th and 16th, and he's meeting with a bunch of GCC leaders. He will meet with King Salman. He will meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That's the headline of a very long, complicated, thrilling, feature-length story, and it's a very complex relationship with a long history. And I think really you can say 4 things about the visit, and all of them are true, and people disagree on what matters more than the other. The first is that the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was a heinous act, was a terrible crime. thoughts with his family and friends and anyone who knew him. It's terrible, and it should never have happened, period. Second, that is the number one issue affecting U.S.-Saudi relations now, and it was the day it happened, and has been consistent in that since that happened. And I don't know anybody that would deny this. And in fact, in a recent Politico piece, which we'll get to in a little bit here, Richard, Mohammed bin Salman said it as well. He denied having anything to do with it, but he said, I know that this is dramatically affecting our relationship, and I want to have a good relationship with the United States, and I want to fix this. I think 3 is that if you were to take a survey of the 966 podcast's 48 episodes and the 48 interviews that we've conducted, the U.S.-Saudi relationship, underneath the surface, the roots between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are deep, and they're entangled together in a good way. And I think that's true in defense and security and military, in the economy, in energy and tech, sector to sector, B2B, G2G. It's really strong and deep and complex, and it's because it's been built up over 80 years. And I think the United States and Saudi Arabia would both greatly benefit by fostering and making those roots healthy again and working together. And I think 4, Richard, is that Saudi Arabia is going to choose its own destiny, and it already has with Vision 2030. It's a huge economic and social overhaul of the whole kingdom. And the pathway that they've chosen for their overhaul is one that I think benefits not just the United States, but our allies, the West, economically, in terms of security and defense, and I think culturally as well. And I think that the United States stands to benefit from engaging with Saudi Arabia versus shunning them. People can generally agree on all 4 of those things, and that's what makes this very complex. I think Biden, like you just said, Richard, he is going with a realist tack now. The world is different than it was when he assumed office. So, yeah, I think it's fair that we talk about all of those things, and that's what we do here. We're an open forum, and so I think this visit forces us to really make an assessment of this.
I like that. I think those are 4 good points. And the only thing I would add is, my point of departure is the same as yours. When we talk, with Saudi U.S. Trade Group, the 966, the Sustic Review, all these things, very Saudi-centric. And we examined details of those aspects that you talked about, Lucien, the many, many sectors and many, many facets of the relationship. And very often we're talking about Saudi. But the point of departure is, for me, is U.S. national interest. It's not Saudi interest.
Agreed.
Somewhere along the line, I concluded that a good, healthy, well-maintained relationship with Saudi Arabia is important to U.S. national interest, and a lot of people agree with me, and it's been the case over the years. But realism allows us to, as Richard Haas said, realism must prevail over idealism. I just find it fascinating in terms of idealism. We just spent, multiple $1 trillion worth in Afghanistan. Initially, we went in to capture and root out, capture Osama bin Laden, ideally, but root out Al Qaeda, and it was successful. But we spent 20 years there, in large part trying to build a democracy and trying to promote women's rights, and these things that we believe deeply are important and are important to us, and we failed miserably. It's a lesson that we've had to learn over and over, but we seem to forget. And I only say that because realism should have trumped idealism there. We can't remake Afghanistan in our mold. And Saudi Arabia, as you alluded to, Saudi Arabia is going to progress at its what it considers its authentic and sustainable pace, and in the manner in which it thinks is most authentic and sustainable. And I'd like to see us support that and endorse it, but it's going to be unsatisfying for us in many ways. Doesn't change the fact that the relationship is very important. And by the way, I think that's part of the therapy of what that Jeddah meeting is going to be. As I mentioned, there's going to be an opportunity to air grievances. And I'm sure from the Saudi perspective, one of those is going to be, and has been in the preliminary meetings, why are you not paying attention to the extraordinary reforms that we've undertaken already? Why do we get zero credit for any of this? Even, we fouled up horribly with Jamal Khashoggi, it was just a tremendous tragedy and misstep. But look at the whole. The direction we're headed, it can only be considered positive. And you have issues with us in terms of detentions and human rights and religious intolerance. All right, we understand that. We're trying to deal with these issues authentically and organically. But you can tell, if you just pay attention, that we are trying to deal with them and we are moving forward. And as I said, I assume that will be one of the messages. Come on, get current on Saudi Arabia.
Richard, that was therapeutic in a way. I'm glad we talked about it, because this is the time to do it. The visit is confirmed, and so it was worth sort of taking a look at the state of the U.S.-Saudi relationship from sober eyes and
take a swing at it. And it's always a little unnerving because it's so fraught, and because the domestic politics drives foreign policy in the States, and there's some very high temperatures and very emotional and committed and passionate people about this and about 9/11 and other things. And their voices aren't invalid by any means. It's just a matter of where you set your priorities and what you think is in the best long-term interest of the U.S.
Couldn't agree more. Richard, let's put a bow on it with that. And I think we should pivot, a big bow, for Father's Day. And I think we should pivot to Yalla, if you're cool with that.
Yalla.
Saudi in a minute.
Yalla.